Oh, yeah, the Democritus.
Okay, so I would understand. Okay, I think that is okay. Okay, so we begin as usually. Giovanna Giardina will present his talk about 1 hour, I think, and then we will have the time that is needed for discussion. Giovanna Rita Giardina is professor of ancient philosophy, history of ancient philosophy at the University of Catania. She is an internationally recognized scholar in Aristotle studies, author of different books, not in English up to now, but very soon. And she is presidential scholar here, or presidential invited. I don't know exactly. It is this presidential scholar, presidential fellow invited by the president. In any case, she's here for 3 months. I don't know whether she will come back here in future. I hope yes. And she will present today title on Aristotle's criticism of Democritus Continuum. That is part of 2 ongoing research. One is a book that is finished and is under press on Aristotle interpretation of Presocratic view about the continuum, and another that better not to speak about because there's a book that Giovanna should write with me from at least 10 years that we are working on it, but it will appear one day or another. So, Giovanna.
Thank you.
I have no idea what to do.
Can I begin?
No, I can try, but it's risky. You know, which one is one? Which one is one?
Maybe this morning and in the chat. Good afternoon. Okay, excuse me. All yours.
The chat in the middle is not a good idea.
Yeah, that's fine.
Ah.
Yeah, it's good to.
We can.
Yeah.
Okay. 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 Thank you. First of all, I apologize to you for reading my presentation, but my English is not proficient enough for me to speak with the only support of the slides. So I begin with my presentation. So we have, no, it don't work.
No, it's working.
On the screen?
You have to pass from the Zoom to the. Now it's working.
Okay. My presentation focus on 4 main points. The first, Presocratic philosophers had an intuitive understanding of the continuum, which they employed without providing a formal definition. The second, I will discuss analogies and differences between the Eleatics and Atomists required to understand the Democritus Continuum. The point 3, Democritus Continuum, the continuity of the natural bodies in Democritus atomism, and the continuity of motion in Democritus atomism, but always according to Aristotle. Democritus mistake in point 4, according to Aristotle, and the Aristotelian solution on the continuity. But
one question. You say Aristotle, Democritus according to Aristotle. Is there possibility to understand Democritus not according to Aristotle? So there are other sources.
Yeah, the scholars say that it is possible. The scholars say are
I'm not sure that on Zoom we see what we should see, right? Because it looks different from what is on a.
Oh, system and cost.
Why? Why? Your screen sharing is paused. Okay. Now stop
please
share.
again.
Stop share. And now share again. Share. This. Share. Now it should look
Yeah, now it's okay.
perfect. Okay. Okay, go. Go. Okay.
and now it's
But
okay
now you
also
have to
for
come
now?
back here for making
Oh,
it work.
perfect.
Okay.
Okay. So, and before I begin, I must also emphasize 2 points. This study is a part of the book we are attempting to write in collaboration with Marco. Our goal is to comprehend Aristotle's continuum. However, to achieve this, it is imperative to grasp Aristotle's view on the continuum of his predecessors. This is because reflecting on his predecessors is a consistent aspect of Aristotle's research strategy. Hence, I will not simply explore Democritus Continuum, but I delve into how Aristotle interprets it. The second caution pertains to the term I use in my analysis, the continuum, with which I translate the Greek term stosiounekes. In Greek, this term is an adjective, but Aristotle employs it with the article, effectively turning it into a noun. The reason for my translation choice, although it may seem somewhat unconventional in modern English, is that Aristotle does not intend stosiounekes to denote a continuous entity or continuity itself, that is, to denote the property of an object. Indeed, his research methodology involves initially examining a specific object and subsequently formulating concepts abstracted from object. Therefore, the continuum itself is an object. From time to time, this object can manifest as a magnitude, a motion, a time, a place. From what I had just said, it becomes evident that the continuum is a magnitude, a body, and so on, which Aristotle refers to as a continuum, emphasizing its quantitative aspect. Indeed, we know from categories 6 that the continuum is a species within the genus of quantity alongside the discrete. Consequently, it plays a significant role in Aristotle's philosophy, particularly in physics, as it identifies the fundamental realities of the natural world, namely material entities in motion.
Sorry, so far as she uses my computer and she uses the linear chart. You see, if someone has something to chart, then you inform us.
I can, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Nonetheless, the continuum is a complex concept to analyze because Aristotle does not provide a systematic treatment of it. Therefore, his theory of the continuum must be reconstructed through various steps and from different works. Aristotle is also aware that his predecessors, the Presocratics and Plato, had ascribed continuity to matter and motion, even though they had neither formally defined the continuous nor treated it theoretically as such. There could be many examples of this evidence, but I will provide just a few of these. In Heraclitus fragment 6, the sun, described as a new everyday, in the words of Aristotle, Meteorologica, which is the source of this fragment, is characterized as being always continually new. Syunekos is the term. This concept of being always continually new alludes to the sun's daily rising and setting, symbolizing an uninterrupted motion that unfolds cosmic order. On the other hand, the reference to the continuous motion of a celestial body, like the sun, is entirely consistent with Heraclitus' philosophical stance. Indeed, Heraclitus assumes an unceasing cosmic motion with the fire as its origin and ultimate destination. In Democritus, fragment 91, the Milky Way is described as being formed by many small stars placed in continuity with each other, synechon. This suggests that Democritus attributes to the Milky Way a nature similar to that of other natural entities. Democritus believes that natural bodies consist of aggregation of atoms, and he emphasizes that natural bodies are being that clings to being, adhering to Parmenides' recommendation of the fragment 8. According to Democritus, this aggregation results in something unified, and therefore in a continuum. In the context of fragment 91, the Milky Way is conceived as an unified aggregate of multiple small stars. The stars, through their aggregation into a continuous whole, produce a single thing, the Milky Way precisely. Of particular interest to us is the fragment of Heraclitus 10. This fragment is attested by Plato in the dialogue The Sophist, where it is stated that Heraclitus and Empedocles recognized that it would be safest to weave together both position, id monism and pluralism, and to say that the being is at the same time many and one, and that it is held together, syneketai, by discord and friendship. The significance of this testimony certainly consists in explicitly attributing to Heraclitus and Empedocles an idea of continuity as that which holds together the one and the many. These two philosophers seem to find in this continuum, which delayed the opposition between unity and multiplicity, the solution to the debate on principles that pits monist against pluralist philosophers. Most importantly, the testimony holds interest in the implicit yet perfectly clear expression by Plato that the continuity is precisely what reconciles unity and multiplicity, thus acting as a connective of parts that would otherwise be separated. This concept of a property that performs the function of holding together the one and the many reflects Aristotle's aim in formulating the definition of the continuum in Physic 5.3. Indeed, in this passage, Aristotle grapples with identifying the specific characteristics that the continuous must possess to fulfill its role in holding together the one and the many, allowing it to be genuinely one while also divisible into multiple and even infinite parts. As a result, the Presocratics may have expressed themselves naively when they used the continuum in their discourses. However, it is clear that they all had a notion of continuity, although they likely had an intuitive knowledge of it and did not provide a formal definition of it. The Presocratics' knowledge and the use of the continuum certainly emerges from the passages we have cited as examples. But not only that. There is another evidence that shows that the Presocratics possessed and used the continuity, namely the following. All, or almost all of them, speak of a primordial matter that is one. This is not only the case of the Ionian and Eleatic philosophers, who are openly monists. For example, for Thales, the primordial matter is only water. For Anaximander, the indeterminate. For the Eleatics, the one being. From Aristotle's point of view, even for the so-called pluralist philosophers, primordial matter is one. He regards as monists also the pluralists, since Empedocles spoke of the sphero, anaxagora of the all the things together, that is a primordial mixture, and Democritus of the common body, as Aristotle calls Democritus primordial one, considering it analogous to the all the things together of Anaxagoras. That is, Aristotle says, a continuum by contact. Indeed, if the principle is one, then it is continuous, as we know also from Metaphysics Delta 6, a passage in which continuous is one meaning of the one. The clearest proof that the Presocratics firmly possessed a notion of the continuum is found in Parmenides. In the first verse of the fragment 8, he lists the characteristics of the being that he will account for in the following verses, and says in the verse 6, one, continuous. Later, he not only clearly shows that these two properties are closely related, but also provides an explanation of the fact that the being is one and continuous. Parmenides' reasoning is circular. Anyone who reads fragment 8 realizes that it is not possible to explain any characteristic of being except by recourse to the others, and vice versa. I cannot explain the whole topic, but to put it briefly, it is possible to say as follows. The is, because Parmenides uses only the third person of the present tense. For Parmenides, there is not future or past. So the is the one being, is one. And so all, it is all. And this prevents the is from having differences of place, time, or quantity, which would prevent it from holding together, synekestai, the verse 23. That is from being a continuum. The is continuous because it is a whole and all, or as Parmenides himself reiterates in the verse 25, it is a continuous all, and it is described by Parmenides as being full of being, that is, as being that clings to being, without admitting any division or the possibility of division. To admit division, the being would have to encompass some difference within itself. However, this difference would be something other than the being, and therefore not being.
Go. Why?
Adesso? Perfetto. So the difference would be something other than being, and therefore not being. But Parmenides initially demonstrated that non-being does not exist. Hence, being cannot accommodate difference because they do not exist. Consequently, it cannot be divided. Therefore, it is continuous, one, whole, all, and solely being, or better, the only thus existing is. Parmenides thus established a theory of being that is perfectly continuous because it is, as Aristotle say in the slide, in the generatione et corruptione, properly one and full being. This makes the Eleatics not admit the existence of the many nor of motion, since, to use Aristotle's words again, from a truly one being, a multiplicity could not be generated, nor from a truly multiple being could a unit be generated. But this is impossible. In these Aristotle's words, we find the problem. Eleatics doctrine delays multiplicity and motion, but this is not a problem for the Eleatics, because they choose to follow reason, the logos, rather than phenomena, and simply choose to deny the latter. However, this is a problem for all those philosophers, such as the pluralists, but also Aristotle, who want to save the phenomena. After Parmenides, it is impossible to transgress the ban that the multiplicity can generate from the one. If the many cannot generate from the one, then multiplicity exists from the beginning, the pluralists think. But in a reality that must be one and continuous, as Parmenides prescribes. This makes us realize that Democritus atomism assumes from Parmenides a series of premises. So we can move on to our second point, that is to the comparison between the Eleatics and the Atomists. Let's get back to the passage already quoted of Aristotle, from a truly one being a multiplicity couldn't be generated, nor from a truly multiple being could a unity be generated, but this is impossible. In Aristotle's point of view, this is just what makes the atomists did not really solve the problem either. On the one side, there's the generatione et corruptione first 8. On the one side, the being of the Eleatics is truly one, and not one than many as the atomists' being. But this is precisely the reason why the Eleatics are forced to deny multiplicity. On the other side, the atomists' being is truly multiple, because it is composed of atoms separated from each other by the void. But this makes a unity cannot be generated from them. Aristotle is also anticipating that the Democritus Continuum by contact is not really a continuum because it is not really one. From the way in which Aristotle argues about the atomists in relation to the Eleatics, one can already guess why he speaks of the continuum in two different ways. Aristotle, indeed, seems to present two different definitions of the continuum in his writings. The first is in Physics 3:1 and says that the continuous is that which is divisible to infinite. And the second, the other, is in Physics 5:3 and says that the continuum is a kind of contiguous, which, however, is obtained when it becomes the same and one, the limit of each of the two parts in which these are in contact, and, as the name indicates, holds them together. A very strange definition.
I perfectly understand that we cannot generate one from
The properly one is only the Eleatics. Okay.
But why we say that we cannot generate the multiple of the one? We have to stay when I take a number, it's my hammer to take on the table, and then I have divided it.
No.
So why not?
If you attend, I explain you this. Yeah. This is one problem. This is one problem. you have to attend. Okay. So I will not dwell here on the specificity of these two Aristotelian formulations of the continuum. I will merely point out that Aristotle explicitly used against the Eleatics the definition of the continuum as that which is infinitely divisible. The effectiveness of this argument against the being as one of the Eleatics is demonstrated by the passage of Physics First 2, in which, discussing the possible ways in which the Eleatics use the term one, Aristotle says that if they understood in the sense of the continuous, then the one will be many, because the continuum is what is infinitely divisible. So the continuum as that which is infinitely divisible in this passage is the immediate opposite of the indivisible continuous of Parmenides, of the verse 22-25. To this, we should add that a long commentary tradition also confirms that Aristotle explicitly opposed the infinite divisibility of the continuum to the theory of the Eleatics. Philoponus and Simplicius, for instance, state that Aristotle intended to oppose with it the absurdities that Zeno derived from the argument of dichotomy. And you have here the translation of Lee of this argument that we read in the commentary on physics of Simplicius. Zeno holds, and I answer to your question, that Parmenides correctly assumed that the one being is an indivisible continuum, because if each of the sensible entities were many, that is, if each were a continuous magnitude that admits division to infinity, then division into two would necessarily have as its final outcome either nothingness, but we know from Parmenides that nothingness does not exist, or something indivisible. The latter would consequently be one, but would not have magnitude, for if it did, it would still be divisible. However, a one devoid a magnitude is itself nothing, since added to something or subtracted from something, it will not make that something either larger or smaller. On the basis of this reasoning, Alexander of Aphrodisias in Simplicius is right to say that Zeno suppresses the one, because by means of the dichotomy we reach with Zeno a one that is nothing. In such a way, we can also understand Eudemus' testimony, also reported by Simplicius, according to which Zeno said that if someone explained to him what the one is, he would be able to show that multiplicity exists, since multiplicity is composed of units, but these units must be something in order to form the multiplicity. As we can see, at the basis of the Zenonian argument of dichotomy is the supposition that the magnitude can be found to be at some point infinitely divided. In short, Parmenides' concept of the homogeneity of the one continuous being implies that if I can divide it, I will be able to divide it infinitely. This possibility of infinite division will eventually lead to an infinitely divided magnitude. Hence, not only will the division inevitably stop at something that lacks magnitude, if it is true that I have achieved an infinitely divided actuality, but it also contradicts the premise. This is because one will have something that, once divided in actuality, can no longer be further divided, even though, according to the premise, it should remain infinitely divisible. So you have the one that is a nothingness if you divide something, okay? The multiplicity is composed of units that are or indivisible or nothing in the discourse of Zeno. And this is the problem of the Eleatics that only Aristotle solves.
The sentence was sampled by Aristotle, not by
Yeah.
Aristotle said I cannot generate.
No, this is a passage of Simplicius, and this is the argument of Zeno. The fragment of Zeno is this.
No, in the last, in the other here, generation corruption, from the 21 building multiplicity
Mhm.
can be generated.
Mhm.
This is Aristotle saying.
This is Aristotle on the Eleatics in the first part of the passage, and after Aristotle on the Atomists in the second part of the passage.
It's simply reporting what
The being of the Eleatics is only one, so the multiplicity cannot arise from it. The being of the atomist is only multiple, so a unity cannot be generated by it. Okay. As strange as it may sound, the atomists reason in a manner quite analogous to the Eleatics. The atomists too consider being as indivisible, not accommodating the void, homogeneous, and devoid of difference that would render it divisible. What distinguishes the atomists is that they attribute these characteristics of the one being from the Eleatics to the atom and identify the infinite number of atoms with being infinitely divided in actuality. It's not coincidental that the issues Simplicius presents concerning Zeno's dichotomy argument are also employed by Aristotle in the generatione et corruptione, first 2 and 8, in the case of the atomists. We can read the passage of first 2. For to suppose that a body is divisible, truth and truth, and that this division is possible, involves a difficulty. What will there be in the body which escapes the division? If it is divisible, truth and truth, and if this division is possible, then it might be at one and the same moment divided truth and truth. And the actual occurrence of this result would involve no impossibility. Hence, whenever a body is by nature divisible truth and truth, whether by bisection or generally by any method whatever, nothing impossible will have resulted if it has actually been divided. For if it has been divided into innumerable parts, themselves divided innumerable time, nothing impossible will have resulted. Thought perhaps nobody in fact could so divide it. Since therefore the body is divisible, true and true, let it have been divided. What then will remain? A magnitude? No, that is impossible, since then there will be something not divided. Whereas ex hypothesi, the body was divisible, true and true. But if it be admitted that neither a body nor a magnitude will remain, and yet division is to take place, the body will either consist of points, and its constituent will be without magnitude, or it will be absolutely nothing. If the latter, then it might both come to be out of nothing and exist as a composite of nothing, and thus, presumably, the whole body will be nothing but an appearance. But if it consists of a point, it will not possess any magnitude. For when the points were in contact and coincided to form a single magnitude, they did not make the whole any bigger, since when the body was divided into 2 or more parts, the whole was not a bit smaller or bigger than it was before the division. Hence, even if all the points be put together, they will not make any magnitude. So the argument is very similar to that of Simplicius in respect of Zeno. It is evident that the atomists, drawing from the Eleatics, arrange
This is Aristotle
this.
Aristotle speaks by someone else.
This is Aristotle that speaks about the atomists. This is a context of the generatione et corruptione in which Aristotle speaks of the atomist, with the Eleatics in pairs.
And the point that Aristotle will do against the reasoning is that the possibility of division does not entice the actuality of division. That's the
For Aristotle, no, but I think that in the reasoning of the Eleatics of the Atomists, if you admit the division, the possibility of division leads us to the actual, yes, the magnitude infinitely divided.
To avoid this conclusion, we need to deny the fact that possibility of division entices
Exactly.
the actuality.
Exactly, or the possibility of infinitely division in another manner. Okay, this is the problem. Okay, so it is evident that the atomists, drawing from the Eleatics a range of theoretical assumptions, reasoned about the divisibility of the continuous in a manner akin to the Eleatics. Aristotle then could have employed against the atomists the definition of the continuous as that which is infinitely divisible, which he repeatedly uses against the Eleatics. Aristotle's idea of the continuous infinite divisibility stands in opposition to Parmenides' indivisible one being, and also contrasts with the indivisibility of the atom. However, Aristotle believes that merely presenting an opposing assertion is inadequate to effectively refute an opponent in a dialectical debate. Instead, Aristotle underscores the importance of a proper analysis and critique of the opponent's arguments rather than solely countering an opposing assertion. Concerning the continuous, Aristotle must elucidate the specific criteria that make a continuous genuinely continuous. This is precisely what he accomplishes through the definition in Physics 5.3. This brings us to our point 3. The atomists require the existence of a multiplicity of separate bodies to explain the multiplicity of natural bodies, but also of the motion. Motion, in fact, occurs through contact, and the contact is only possible when there are many separate bodies. Atoms aggregate and are thus described as being that clings to being, as for Parmenides, a concept that Aristotle referred to as common body and characterized it as a continuous by contact in Physics 3.4. Signifying that it is continuous because it is one, and it is one because it is solely being, hence homogeneous, but also that is by contact because it is one of many. Contact and homogeneity are therefore the conditions that the atomists must assume to explain motion. In the Generatione et Corruptione, Aristotle consistently lauds Democritus for his understanding, which sets him apart from other physicists, that in order for motion to occur, there must be contact and homogeneity between the agent and the persons. In atomism, the agent and the person, from whose interaction motion arises, are homogeneous because they are composed of atoms, all derived from the division of the common body, and they induce motion by coming into contact with one another. Aristotle praises Democritus because this stance aligns with his own theoretical one. Aristotle explained that white, for instance, cannot be affected by a line, and a line does not act upon white. On the contrary, white can be affected by black, because white and black belong to the same genus. Similarly, cold is affected by hot, which is homogeneous with it. Contact, a subject to which Aristotle dedicates entirely the chapter 6 of the first book of the Generatione et Corruptione, serves as the medium through which the agent establishes a relationship with the passion. As Aristotle also notes, it is the point of the relationship which the mover establishes with the mobile. Aristotle's appreciation for Democritus does not stop here, for Democritus also distinguished different types of movement in a similar manner to Aristotle. If you see the slide, you can see that the type of motion for Democritus and Aristotle are the same: generation, corruption, alteration, increase, decrease, displacement. But you can say also that these motions are very different, because for Democritus, generation is aggregation of atoms. For Aristotle, is the coming to be of a substance. The corruption, separation of the atoms. For Aristotle, the passing away of the substance, and so on.
They are really different.
Really different. Yes, yes. I try to explain why.
It's not aggregation of atoms.
No.
Is not aggregation of atoms the way in which Democritus understands the cognitive substance. For example,
Democritus think that you have an aggregation of atoms, and so you have an entity of the natural world, and you have
atoms is the cognitive substance.
yes, but is also solely an aggregation. In the philosophy of Aristotle, for example, a simple aggregation is a wall in which you have the part that are only, is not a very change. What compose a wall don't change.
There is no doubt that Aristotle does not think like Democritus. What I want to say is that the way it seems to me that Democritus and Aristotle describe in different ways, but the same thing. So what Democritus identifies as a aggregation of atoms is exactly what Aristotle identifies as a common view of substance, even if Aristotle thinks that it's not enough to have atoms aggregated to a substance. That is another story. So in fact, phenomenologically speaking, explanatory speaking, they're different. But phenomenologically speaking, Aristotle and Democritus point to the same.
Exactly. For example, if you see the displacement, you see the great difference between Democritus and Aristotle, because for Democritus, the displacement is a random motion. In the physics of Aristotle, we have only teleology of motion. So you have an oriented motion of a body to a place. So
what I try to describe it is phenomenon here.
Exactly.
They focus on the same phenomenon. They explain them in different ways.
These are the reason. These are the reason because Aristotle loves Democritus. Democritus is a great physicist for him, but Democritus, the philosopher, has.
He's a great physicist, but there's simply one problem: he's wrong.
It's wrong. Exactly. This is the story. For Democritus, OCIE is not in the language of Democritus, obviously. Aristotle translates in his language and in the structure of his philosophy, the think of his predecessors. But the change is the same. For example, the coming to be of a baby for Democritus is an aggregation of atoms. For Aristotle, another thing. A very different thing. Because it's a change.
I thought that was what you were trying to do.
Generation and corruption that are change of the substance are only change. Alteration, increase, decrease, displacement are very motion. because they are only change of a property in the matter. So we have a change only of the form in the alteration, increase, decrease, displacement. On the contrary, in generation and corruption, we have a change of the form and on the matter. So when we speak of motion in Aristotle, precisely, we have to speak only of alteration, increase, decrease, and displacement.
What is very nice here, I think that we cannot discuss that possibly then, even in some sense, modern one is Democritus, because the consolidation factor is the base of modern physics is on this side. Aristotle's strange idea that matter can disappear.
No, disappear, no. But don't disappear, but you have a matter that is another thing of the entity that come to be. Because, for example, when you have the coming to be of a baby, you have also the blood of the mom and the seed of the father. And that is a matter very different of the baby. Alteration is only the change of quality. For example, no.
The birth of the baby is an alteration of the seed. The seed transformed in the baby. So the generation corruption is the conservation of matter. It's simply a sort of alteration. No?
No.
No.
Why not?
No. That substantial change and non-substantial change are they're analogous, but they are fundamentally different species of the genus change.
And not only for the genus, because you have here a true coming to be. In the example of alteration, for example, you have Socrates that becomes a philosopher or musicist. Okay, but he is always Socrates. Here in generation corruption is not so. Okay.
So, for example, in water, liquid water becoming ice, what would Socrates say? What would Aristotle say? That it is a change of.
This is the solidification of water. It's an alteration of water.
It's an alteration of quality or alteration of substance.
No, I think that is only aggregation.
Aggregation.
Aggregation, because you have something that is the same thing, water, but only some more denser, compact. Yeah. So you have here this type of motion, but also in the alteration you have also the mixing. That is another thing, because the mixing is a change of quality of the two matter, for example, but in a manner that when you have the final thing, you have a thing that is another thing from its components, and you have also the possibility to recover the components of this thing. For example, the bronze, come si dice in inglese, bronzo, rame, stagno.
The medal, the third medalist.
Bronze. Bronze is a metal that has two components, rame e stagno. And but nel bronzo there are not rame e stagno, because the bronze is one thing very different, and this is a mixture. And if you see, also the mixture is not an aggregation. You have an aggregation only when you take things and put together, okay? But I think are always that they are, okay?
The process continues.
The bronze is continuous, but this is another problem.
Yes, the process continues, because it is an example of the possibility of getting one
Mhm.
from different. Exactly like the example of the, I don't know what is in English, when you put a plant on another plant.
Mhm.
Or grafted.
Exactly. Aristotle made the example of the glass as an example of the continuum that constructed by.
Continuum by contact.
No, you remember that in the end of the passage of 5,
Mhm.
made the example of the
5-3.
Yes, particularly in italiano, dell'innesto.
In 5-3.
5. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the example of the nest, of the plant.
Are you
And-
sure?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So we have the slide on the motion that are apparently the same in Democritus and in Aristotle. So we have all the elements to examine Aristotle's thoughts on Democritian atomism, and we begin with why, according to Aristotle, continuous bodies composed of atoms, as the atomists believe, cannot exist. Recall what we read in the Generatione et Corruptione first 8. Always the same phrase. From a truly one being, a multiplicity could be generated, nor from a truly multiple being could a unity be generated. But it is impossible. To demonstrate this, we first need the entire passage of Physics 5.3. In this passage, Aristotle defines concept. Oh, exactly. Okay. Aristotle defines a concept beginning with the simplest and progressing to the most complex. And when I refer to simple, I do not mean from the hermeneutical perspective, but rather in terms of composition. This is because each of the subsequent concepts relies on one or more preceding concepts for its definition, making it compound rather than simple. So we can the passage first. After discussing these things, we say what are together and separately, and what is the being in contact, and what is intermediate, and what is subsequent, and what are contiguous and continuous, and to what things each of these belongs by nature. Together, then, I mean that they are according to place, how many things are in one first place. Separately, on the other hand, how many are in another place, while those whose extremes are together are in contact. Is intermediate the term toward which that which changes comes by nature before the final term toward which it changes according to nature by changing continuously. Subsequent is that of which, coming after the beginning, or by position or species, or some other thing determined in such a way, there is no intermediate between things that are in the same genus, and of which it is the subsequent. Contiguous is that which, being subsequent, will be in contact. The continuum is a kind of contiguous, is the passage we have seen before. I mean, however, that it is continuous when it becomes the same and the one, the limit of each of the two parts in which these are in contact, and as the name indicates, holds them together. Having defined this, it is clear, okay, it is clear that the continuum lies in these things from which something unitary is produced by nature according to the point of the conjunction, Synapsin is the term we have seen in the fragment of Democritus. And just as sometimes what holds together becomes one, in the same way the whole will also be one. That is, for example, either by adjoin or by glue or by contact or by natural union. I don't know, because, for example, in the Partibus Animalium, an example of a thing of continuous is the vertebral column. That are different parts, but in the set. Okay, it is possible. It is possible. This difficult passage would deserve an entire coursework. I tried to provide just a few explanations that we need to understand Aristotle's criticism of Democritus. First, we observe that in Aristotle's text, for each concept, we encounter the same question: what is, which serves to distinguish one idea from another. In the case of two pairs only, together and separately, and contiguous and continuous, the terms are directly linked by a simple conjunction. Actually, separately doesn't play a significant role in our discussion. Aristotle mentioned it merely for completeness, since it is the opposite of together. In the case of contiguous and continuous, the connection is explicit, because continuous is a type of contiguous. Secondly, we observe how certain concepts fit into the definition of subsequent notions, as illustrated by the figure. Together is employed to define objects in contact. Intermediate serves to define the subsequent. In contact and the subsequent together define the contiguous, and contiguous allows us to arrive at the continuum. Clarifying the meaning of each of these terms is so essential to avoid misunderstandings when dealing with the subsequent terms. First of all, we have to clarify what does it mean together according to place, because Aristotle has said together, but in the sequel of the passage we have according to place, okay? With not only together, but together according to place. Aristotle says that are together according to place things that are in only one place that is also their first place. In Physics 4:2 and 4, Aristotle considers as a first or proper place that which surrounds that of which it is place. So, for example, the surface of my body is my first place, my proper and first place. There is no good reason to believe that the concept of together according to place Aristotle discusses in our passage should have a different meaning from the one Aristotle sings to this notion in Physics 4:2 and 4. However, the notion of together according to place, understood in this way, performs a unifying function that, if not well understood, seems to anticipate the meaning of later notions, especially coinciding with the notion of in contact. It is necessary indeed for two bodies that are together to touch each other, as there is a single place that contains their extremes. In fact, the notion of together according to place is broader than that of in contact. This can be inferred by examining some passage in Physics 4 from the theory of time, because in these passages Aristotle explains how in same place such as a part of a distance, are together a body, its movement, and the time that account the movement. The unifying function of the first place also elucidates so what is in contact. When the extremities of a magnitude are together, according to the place, they are unified in terms of their position. I mean that in contact is not this a line, for example, in which you have 2 points very strictly, because Aristotle explained that in this case, between the 2 points, you have also a line. You have not a point, a line. For example, if this line is time, here you have time, a portion of time. So the unifying role of together by the place in the definition of the contact signifies that the contact is this. You have only 1 point of the contact. Okay? This is very important. Only 1 point. At this point, taken so, with this point taken so, you have a part that is before and a part that is next. This is very important for our discourse. Okay? So, this is why when we consider a distance but differentiate between 2 parts of it, each having its own extremity, for them to be in contact, these extremities must occupy the same unique place that encompass them, okay? Consequently, the point of contact is only one and distinguishes a before and an after within a magnitude.
So the idea is that if I take 2 tables and put them close one to the other,
It's not
because the extremity of this table
okay.
different things than the extremity of this table. In order to have the contact, I need that the extremity of this table is the same thing.
Or if you consider that this is only a line of the contact between the two tables, so you have a contact or 2 things in contact. But if you account one extremes and another extremes, you have the
subsequent. There is nothing intermediary.
Subsequent.
The same space. On the same species that are subsequent, but they're not in contact.
Yeah.
Well, they're not.
Sorry?
No.
Even not
No.
But they could count as contiguous.
For the contiguity, we have need of the subsequent. The subsequent is the notion that has need of the intermediate, because Aristotle has said that we have a subsequent when a thing coming after the beginning or by position of speakers, etc. No, what is the as not an intermediate of the same genus. Or the same genus. For example, this table has in the medium the bottle, they are subsequent, because the intermediate is not of the same genus. So this table is subsequent to this table. Okay.
But if the boundaries of the 2 tables or extremes, which are calling, do not have anything like the bottle between them, and so they're against each other, but if they're not in the same place, imagine if you do that. They would not be contiguous, or they would be contiguous.
Yeah, they can be contiguous.
But they would not be subsequent. because they
Contiguous,
don't have a-
you have the contiguous when you have two things that are subsequent and in contact.
But to be subsequent requires that there be something of not the same genus between.
The contiguous as a need of the homogeneity, so of the subsequent. In the definition of the continuous, the contiguous, you have the contact, but also the condition of subsequent. The condition of subsequent is the condition that introduce the homogeneity.
I'm so confused. So
It is very,
the contiguous,
very complex.
that which is contiguous.
Aspetta che glielo facciamo in
must
qualche
be
modo.
subsequent, which means that there must be something of a different genus in between these two items.
For example, if
But he
you,
says that,
if you
he
have
says that the continuous is a kind of the contiguous.
this kind of the contiguous because has need of the homogeneity, okay? It's fine.
These are not continuous. Because this is green, and this is blue. Contact.
Yeah.
Not continuous.
They're in contact,
In contact.
not.
This is also contiguous.
These are continuous, but they are not continuous because of problems. Sorry, I should not have written it in this. This is.
Oh, I see.
So sorry, this is contiguous, no, in contact, but
In
not
contact,
contiguous,
but
not
not,
subsequent,
not subsequent.
because they're not homogeneous.
But
These
those
are-
are subsequent,
Sorry,
subsequent.
This is in contact and subsequent.
so it is contiguous.
So it is contiguous because in contact and subsequent are the
Because
terms
the point
of the definition
is
of
of a different
contiguous.
genus. Is that
But
right?
the point is the same or different?
Here there is only one part.
Is it the same?
So
or
the same genus,
Same.
the same.
Okay.
You take a point in the time and it is the instant, for
Yeah.
example. But when you take the instant in the time, you have a time that is before and a time that is next.
Then how do we call them when there is something in between that is of a different genus?
The
How do you
different
call
genus,
that?
when you can add the different genus can be the intermediate. For example, you have an house, a tree and an house, okay?
So when you have an intermediate, the intermediate has to be always of a different genus.
The intermediate is only one thing that is next another. For example, if I run my first passo, step, okay. My first step is the first, the second is subsequent to first. The two is next to one,
Yeah, but
and the tomorrow next to
yes, but they're the same genus. One step, another step,
the
another
same
step,
genus.
right? There is no intermediate.
There is nothing.
There is a nice example by Thomas. I don't know how you call it.
Oh, questo complica le
I think
cose.
when I read this example, I
It's not
understood a lot of things. I don't know whether you were in Pompeii. You were in Pompeii?
I know about it. I don't think they're-
Okay, in Pompeii, there is a clear example of something that apparently was very usual in Roman times, but we do not find a lot of examples now. That is, there is a road, okay, so, and this is the road, and then the poor pedestrian has to cross the road. And now today we have the blind, the line, white line, but in Pompeii, what there was in the stone here, so you can go from here to this step and from here to this step. But they could not be continuous because if they are continuous, the chair, the road, so cannot come. So, okay, so then what the poor pedestrian go from here to here, from here to here, and from here to here. So these are subsequent because there is nothing as a stone between them, but they're not in contact. Okay,
For example,
but if they were this way, they would be in contact and subsequent, contiguous. They are not contiguous, but subsequent. Even if here you can put what you want here. You can connect an intermediate that is not homogeneous. Okay?
more simple. 1 and 2 are subsequent. 1 and 2 no, because you have as intermediate a number, the same juice. Okay? So the things are subsequent only if they have not an intermediate of the same juice between them. Okay?
3.5.
It's clear. It's clear. Okay. So we have said that the subsequent is the notion that introduced the homogeneity for the first time in our notions in this passage, because you can have together in the place two things very different, in contact the same. Okay. With the subsequent, we have the homogeneity. Okay. And the subsequent within contact, because, for example, 1 and 2 are not in contact. When you have the two things that have homogeneity between them and are also in contact, you have a contiguous thing. Okay, contiguous.
Thank you.
So we.
Sorry. Does Aristotle think that we could have two different things occupying same space?
Due cose diverse che occupano la stessa sfera?
That's a very difficult question because it depends what you mean by proper space. And that is a long discussion
primary
about Ross and all that. It is depends,
But,
and the
in
definition of
reality-
together that is very complicated. Two things are together when they occupy the same proper place. What does it mean to occupy the proper space? If a proper space in the space of one thing seems to be that two different things cannot be real
Wait, I want to
together.
hear how Giovanna answers it though.
Yeah.
I want to hear her answer.
It is the difficult of the notion of together that is very kind, very gentle. Because effectively, if the first place is the place that surround the thing, for example, me and only me, if you have two things together, there is identity of the things. We have not this difficulty with the contact, because in the definition of the contact, you have not two things in the same place. You have the extremities, only the extremities. So you have the point of the contact.
Only one.
Well, only one, because you have the need of the same place for the contact. In the definition of the contact, you have the together by the place. So the place of the point is only one, cannot be two. And in fact, when you have this example, you have always a distance.
So, but
Between the two.
in the first case, we say that there is only one point that is common to both. There are
Yeah,
not
exactly.
there are not two different extremities occupying same place.
Exactly. This is very important.
This is exactly for the reason for which we take on not continuous.
This is,
So there are
for
two.
example, the question of the time, because when you have a point, the point is not a part of the line or a part of the motion or of the distance. You have a point that, for example, in the time is the instant, and the instant as this in the motion, you have a point of stop, you have no motion. And this is the point that distinguishes a portion of the distance, of time, of motion, etc. Okay?
So would that be of the same genus? A different genus?
Okay.
What the question? Because
Well,
if the point is the point of the
genus
stop.
or the
point of
different
motion,
genus.
The point is an instant and this is not time.
The
Is that
point-
different genus then?
It can-
The
they
point-
can-
I think
can-
that this
can
is a
have
very
the
nice
same.
point. I think that Aristotle, no, I think it's an important point. I don't know whether what Giovanna think about that, we should agree to write the book, but it maybe maybe on the point of view, no? I think some things that still is not accepted. I think for Aristotle answer would be that the point is dramatic. The instant dramatic are entity of reason, are not physical entities. And
In the
what seems to
continuous.
be relevant is when here Aristotle is not making mathematics, he's making physics. No? A continuity is a physical property,
Okay.
it's not a
Yeah.
mathematical
The
property.
thing that's offered in
So the
here
point
is the
is not
notion
there.
of boundary or the extremity, as you've been emphasizing. And there are many books on what the extreme is for Aristotle. And this is exactly where the debate is, like, is the
Yeah, not the
extreme
continuous.
the point or the line, you know?
Mhm.
But it is a problem for Aristotle scholars. It's a great question.
Okay.
So
So,
to say the point, if you say the instant is there only insofar as supervene on the real existence, which is the body of the time. Okay, so you can speak of the point, you can speak that the point is only one, but when you say that the point is only one, you are not again describing an entity, which is the point. Okay, because the point is there only insofar as it is extreme of the line. The only thing that you can say there, and the two lines can have the same extremity, that does not mean that exists something at the point.
in the continuous.
In the continuous.
In the continuous, yes. This is, if you have the point, you have an interruption in the distance, in the time. Indeed, in the motion, you have a point of
Yes.
stop.
Right?
So you have the motion one and the motion two is not continuous. But this notion helps us to arrive to the continuous. What the continuous is.
Yes and no, because when you have the motion there, and then you stop there, you do not stop for an instant. Because in an instant, you do not move and you cannot rest. You stop, you stay a certain time there, and then you go. And in this moment, you are actualizing the point, but in reality, to actualizing the point, for an instant, you have to rest for more than 1 instant. Because the instant as such is not a lapse of time. So you cannot say that I stop for 1 instant, or I move for 1 instant. Okay? Otherwise, we understand the paradox.
We speak of the continuous. So what characterizes the continuous?
Exactly the fact that
Yeah,
we have no instant.
we have not the point.
There, the last one is the continuous, because we have no part.
Okay, can I continue? It is homogeneous, the continuous, because as Aristotle asserts, it is a type of contiguous, so it is homogeneous. However, in the continuum, the point of the contact is not taken, because it is not that point which, akin to the instant in time, marks the beginning of one part and the end of the other part of the wall, thus serving the function of dividing the part, this point. On the contrary, it is that untaken point within a magnitude, motion, or time, serving to hold the parts together and thereby creating continuity for the wall. In this manner, the point that ensures continuity for the wall is, as will become evident, a point of inherence for contraries, by which it is the wall that is altered, not merely apart, according to Aristotle's perspectives. After acquiring these definitions in Physics 5.3, Aristotle can argue against the idea that Democritus' bodies, the generated one or the primordial common body, can be considered continuous. In Physics 6.1, okay, we have the following passage. If, however, continuous in contact and subsequent are as we have defined before, it is impossible for anything continuous to be composed of indivisible. For example, a line composed of points cannot be continuous if it is true that the line is continuous while the points is indivisible. Neither the extremes of the points are one. Due to the indivisible, there is no extreme or some other part. Nor are the extremes together, as there is no extreme in something without parts. Indeed, the extreme is different from that of which it is an extreme. Extremes are that of parts or of a whole. Atoms, being indivisible, possess neither parts nor extremes. Consequently, they fail to meet the very first condition for forming a continuum. That is, two or more atoms will not be able to have extremes together. Therefore, atoms cannot come into contact with each other, contrary to Democritus' belief. As a result, they cannot form a continuous body through aggregation, and in fact, cannot even form a contiguous one. The fact that the atom, as indivisible, possesses neither parts nor extremes enables Aristotle to reject Democritus' entire theory of motion that we have seen before. As I said before, all forms of motion, according to Democritus, arise from contact. Indeed, motion is generated through the contact of the agent with the patient. However, there is another reason why Democritus' theory of motion is flawed. It is worth noting that the atomists postulated the existence of indivisibles in their attempt to address the problem of multiplicity, which had emerged due to the uniformity of Parmenides' being. The absence of difference of time, place, and quantity was in fact the basis for the indivisibility of Parmenides' being. Democritus' atoms, on the other hand, are homogeneous. This implies, for Aristotle's perspective, that they lack the difference necessary for the relationship between the agent and the patient. If these both are entirely homogeneous, Aristotle explicitly asks, which will be the agent and which the patient? In Aristotle's terminology, agent and patient represent a pair of opposites that establish a specific difference within a single genus, as white and black, hot and cold. This relationship is explained through the theory of potency and entelechy, that is a notion, one of the two notions of act in the Aristotle's philosophy. The atomists, by assuming the necessity of homogeneity between the agent and the patient, would have understood, using Aristotle's examples, that white cannot act on a line. However, if both agent and patient are homogeneous, only homogeneous, we encounter the scenario of white acting on white, which is absurd. Okay, we have also only the homogeneity, so the white act on the white. Not to mention that anything would then be capable of affecting itself. Aristotle thinks that alongside homogeneity, there must be a difference of species. In this way, within the genus of color, as in the previous example, white may act on black or vice versa, or it may still act on an intermediate color. Similarly, for the atomists, hot would act on hot and cold on cold. For Aristotle, on the contrary, the hot acts on the cold and vice versa. In this theory of motion in Physics 3.1, Aristotle explains that the being in potency and being in entelechy, in act, fall within the same genus, but exhibit contrariety. A subject can simultaneously be in potency and in entelechy, a certain thing, without violating the principle of non-contradiction. This is the state of a subject where a form inheres, with respect to which potency and entelechy represent the absence and the presence of the same form. For instance, when the temperature of a body increases, it occurs because the body is in potency hot and in entelechy cold. You have a body that is cold if you have the possibility that this body begin to be cold. In this case, we can say that hot is acting within the body at the expense of the coldness it possesses. The same principle applies to divisibility and divisibility. It's the same thing. As the atomists assumed the homogeneity of being without differences, they are compelled to assert, like the Eleatics, that divisibility in potency to infinity is also division in actuality to infinity. In contrast, according to Aristotle, a body is divisible in potency but indivisible in entelechy. When you have in a continuous thing a motion, for example, a body that is white and becomes black, you have in any point the white and the black, okay? So the body can become black because it is white. If it is black, it is not possible. This is not possible, okay? The same thing for the visibility.
Yeah.
The same principle for the divisibility and indivisibility. He explained this in a passage we can read, that any sensible body is both divisible and indivisible at any point is not absurd at all, for it will be on the one hand divisible at any point, that is infinitely in potency, and on the other hand indivisible infinitely in entelechy. Being everywhere divisible in potency at the same time that indivisible everywhere in entelechy might appear impossible. For if there is a possibility that is everywhere divisible, such a possibility could in fact be realized, with the consequence not so much that it would be both in the same time indivisible and in fact divided in entelechy, that is in act, but that it would be in fact be divided anywhere that is infinitely. Nothing of divisible would then remain, and the body would be reduced to something incorporeal, and again would either be generated from points or, in short, from nothing. It's the same discourse of before. The infinite divisibility of the magnitude, which defines Aristotle's continuum, implies that at any point the magnitude is divisible in potency, but indivisible in entelechy. Each point in a magnitude, then, is the point at which homogeneous contrary inherent, black-white, hot-cold, divisible, indivisible, for example. It is not a coincidence that Aristotle asserts in the generatione et corruptione first two, it is necessary, therefore, that in the body does exist indivisible quantities that are invisible. This is because the point of inherence, where divisibility in potency meets indivisibility in entelechy, is the point of contact where two homogeneous contraries touch each other in a substratum, one acting, the other being acted. However, this point of contact, where homogeneous contraries touch each other, is one and keeps the two parts of a continuum together, rather than separating them. So it is not this, but the point in the line, all the point in the line, everywhere. For Aristotle, the point of continuity, as it were, maintains the whole, and is thus continuous, homogeneous, and one, conforming to the prescriptions of Parmenides. In this way, what changes is the whole, and not one or more of its parts, as Democritus mistakenly thought. Because for Democritus, for example, the alteration is the change of position, of order, of also only one atom in the wall, okay? So is a change, a local change. You have the position or the order of an atom in this line, and the line is not the same than before. This is not possible for Aristotle. Okay, so we can see finally the list of the mistakes that Aristotle imputes to Democritus. Democritus is wrong to identify generation with aggregation and corruption with the separation, because generation and corruption are changes of the whole, and thus of the continuum that occur when both matter and the form of the substratum change. On the contrary, aggregation is of bodies in contact with each other, as in a wall are stones and brick and lime, is an example of Aristotle, that of the wall. Assuming indivisibles, Democritus cannot therefore obtain aggregation of this either. Atoms have not parts and extremes, without which they cannot even establish contact, thus remain irretrievably separated from each other by the void. Democritus is wrong when he speaks of alteration in thinking that this occurs due to a shift in the order or position of atoms in the body, because the contact between the atoms through which they could be acted and produce affections is again missing. Aristotle, on the contrary, thinks the alteration is of the whole entity and cannot occur because a local atomic change occurs. Democritus is wrong when he thinks that increase and decrease consist simply in the fact that atoms are added to or subtracted from a body, whereas instead, as Aristotle explains in the Generatione et Corruptione first 5, increase and decrease are also changes of the whole continuous body, and nothing becomes greater if, after something has been added to it, it is not entirely changed. In the example that I put in my stomach, a plate of spaghetti. This is not increase. The increase is of the wall, of the entire body, okay? In Democritus' model, if I put in my stomach a plate of spaghetti, this is an increase, because is okay, yeah.
If you put cake, there is going to be an increasing.
Yeah. Okay. Democritus' inability, and I think.
When you take the spaghetti, you eat the spaghetti, just in the moment eating the spaghetti, you are not increasing. And then you get to sleep. And then there is a process in organism that transforms the spaghetti in calories and fat, then
yeah. So
the
increase is an alteration of the meal, but increase of the body that has eaten the spaghetti. So the increase is a change of the whole body by the quantity of the body. And this is very, very different from the Democritus model. Democritus' inability to account for all these changes always resides fundamentally in the same basic problem. Atoms cannot affect and be affected each other because they are separate and cannot make contact. They can therefore in no way constitute a continuum by contact, that is a quantity that is truly one and the whole, because Aristotle's continuum by contact is one in which the contact is only potential and the quantity is undivided. Thus, the continuum for Aristotle is something that is one by its very nature. For example, the water, so that the one will have only water, without there being an individual point that allow to identify an after and a before in the water. But continuous will also be a wood when, if it has been divided, one reassembles its parts, for example, with glue, and one will have wood that is again equal and one, undivided, so that it will not be possible to say that in this wood one part comes before and the one after.
The real mystery too, that I was asking what something in fact because top of glue the bread are. Because anytime that they try to do some glue, in fact, it never make one because our glue is not good. So I think that they had a very good glue.
If you logically consider the wood with the glue one, this is a continuous.
He's joking about
Right.
what they-
Okay.
My idea that this passage shows that we have a very good glue in Greek that we don't have.
Okay.
We don't have such a good glue.
Ok, ok. Dunque, io mi fermerei. I stop. I stop. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I stop.
Thank you. Okay, so I came here because now I have to look at the people. Okay. How can I see all of you? In any case, if there are some questions from the Zoom, I think that we should begin by them. And if not, I ask for question here. Okay, so are there questions here?
Okay, this is great. Thank you so much for sharing this and talking us through some of the finer details. So I really like the way that you set up that comparison between Democritus and Aristotle and how they very differently imagine, what's going on when you find an entity in the world, right? But just at the end there, you came back around to that and you said, well, Aristotle's going to say that Democritus is wrong in his conception of A, B, C, D, and E for, and you explain why in each case. On the point about alteration, which I think for Aristotle would be non-substantial change. That's when a substance undergoes a qualitative or quantitative or relational or, all of the other 9 categories kind of change. How did you put that? He thinks that Democritus is wrong because what undergoes the change is a whole. It's something that's a meaningful continuity. Yeah. So, okay, so that strikes me as like funny, right? Because when I think about getting sunburned in the summer, you say, well, it's the whole of me that gets sunburned. There's something funny about it. Like it just strikes me as funny. But going to the text in chapter 2 of the categories, just to kind of cast this in Aristotelian terms to make sense of why it's so strange sounding. He says of the kind of predication that you get when you predicate one of those other 9 category things of a substance. He says that is this in predication, it's the in relation. He says by being present in the subject, or one of those properties is predicated of a subject. I do not mean that it's present as parts are present in a whole, but I mean by being incapable of existence apart from the said subject. So in the
The
categories here,
relation,
sorry,
the relation.
uh,
What is the subject of the phrase?
the subject is a substance.
A substance,
I think he means a primary substance too, so it's an individual or whatever.
the primary substance of the categories or of the metaphysics?
I'm looking at the categories, so
Okay.
it would be that kind of ousia. He does use the word ousia there, but I know it's a little different from the hylomorphism.
So the individual, the primary substance in the
Yes.
categories is the.
And that is a
Marco.
material thing, yes, right, so an individual substance.
Marco.
So
Marco.
when a
Not
property,
the man, but Marco, etc.
I understood.
He
that,
says-
but
he says when a predicate, when a property is predicated of Marco, but non-essentially, so it's some accidental property. That property is present in Marco, not as parts are present in a whole, but by being incapable of existence apart from Marco.
Yeah.
So it's funny, he's denying the whole language, like we shouldn't be thinking about wholes when we think about how these properties are predicated of their subjects.
Yeah.
So we see.
Yeah.
So it's like he's warning us off of thinking about the belonging of the property to its subject in the way that you kind of suggested there, when you said, when you kind of accounted for what his disagreement would be with Democritus. So I guess part of my question is how do we understand that notion of the relationship of the accidental properties to their subjects? So again, kind of going over that alteration conception.
If I have understand your question, the first thing, aggregation of which Democritus speaks is not a motion for Aristotle. Okay? In fact, we have not aggregation in the Aristotelian model. If you see, no, hai tolto la possibilità di mettere la slide.
PDF. No.
Ah, ok.
I thank you very much, by the way.
Ok.
Where?
Ah, vabbè, aspetta, ci penso. Ok. If you see, generation is a change that Democritus has in common with Aristotle. But if you see the motion and the change in Aristotle model, you have not aggregation, because aggregation is not a motion. Why it is not a motion? Because you have aggregation when you have the example of the wall. In the wall, the parts of the wall are what they are. The line is line, the brick are bricks, and so on. So you have not change of these parts of the wall in the philosophy of Aristotle. So this is the first very difference with Aristotle. When you
sorry,
Mm.
you say that aggregation is not the motion. In a sense, I understand what you say when Aristotle made this list of motion does not list aggregation. But I think that we should understand aggregation as a sort of corrupt and displacement.
No. Yeah,
Here,
okay.
here, you go together, there is
Yeah.
a
But the fora is not is a displacement, is not aggregation.
is that I want to say a displacement can be an aggregation. The aggregation can be made under the form of a displacement.
No,
Aggregation is
displacement is only a motion in the place, in the place.
together.
So the two atoms are in another place.
Yes, but
They are displaced. So, but it is
Now,
not
down
an
here,
aggregation.
down here,
It is
displaced
not an
for us.
aggregation. You have a clear model in the theory of the motion of Aristotle. The model is this. You have, for example, a line that is a model of only one motion. You have the point A and the point A. In the point B, you have a mobile, and the mobile in point A is not what it will be in the point B, and here is a substratum that is not only matter, but for example, Giovanna, okay, for the displacement, Giovanna has the power, the potency to be in the point B. Enough. Okay? This is the displacement. The same thing for the alteration. Giovanna under the sun begin black from white. Okay? She is white at the point A. Under the sun for a week, she is black. And this point is the point of the act. Giovanna is black and cannot be black, has not the power in the point B. The power is eliminated in the point B. The aggregation is not is nothing of these motions. Nothing. Because you have a change of the substratum in the categories, in the category of place, Giovanna in A is not Giovanna in B. She has another definition. In the aggregation, you have the bricks on the table, the bricks in the wall is the same brick.
Wait, she has a different definition.
But it
Yes.
is depends what we mean by aggregation. So
In the
Democritus? What is Democritus aggregation? I always understood the Democritus aggregation, but I'm wrong, as the fact that you have different atoms.
The being
scatter
that
and they
links
stay,
to being.
And I go to come together, and now very
Very Simplicius
in order to
says
create,
that.
you have to display.
So the question was about whether that's motion. And the atoms are moving, but the wall is not moving. So I think if you're talking about what's being generated, that's not motion. Thing being generated is not moving, right? So I think that's the difference. I think that's the distinction that
Okay,
why,
so you
why,
say,
why we shouldn't think of
if I
aggregation.
understand what you say, in order to have aggregation, we need displacement, but the displacement itself is not enough for aggregation.
And the thing being displaced are not the thing being aggregated.
Okay,
The
yeah.
aggregate
It's another
is
thing.
different thing.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
good.
the aggregate is the product of the aggregation,
Right. And the aggregate
of
is
the
not moving.
endpoint of the.
Okay, good.
For the passage of the categories, what Aristotle says in this passage
That place.
is a reference of the form, not a simple properties, for example, quantity or qualities, but for example, the fact that Marco is Marco. Okay. To be Marco for Marco is inseparable from Marco. Because Marco, there is not exist with his essence, his form.
Right.
But his form is not part of Marco. It's not a part.
Right, so his definition doesn't change no matter where he goes. That's why I was surprised when you said your definition changes.
When you have this model, what changes is always a form. A form. If the form is the form of the black, you have an alteration. If the form is
But the form itself doesn't change for him. The essence doesn't undergo change. It's only the accidental
not
properties that
that
change.
is very difficult thing because you have the form only here. The form
If the form
is
changes, the triangle ceases to be a triangle.
the form is this is a plane by Aristotle. The form is in the thing only when the thing is in act. Okay? To have a form for a thing signifies to be in act. For example, for me, to have the form of the
Oh, it's to be in
is to
actuality.
be-
Okay, I see, sorry,
Oh,
okay.
okay.
Yeah, gotcha, I gotcha.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Enough, okay? And the difficult for the theory of motion is to demonstrate that you have the form also when you have not the form. Because if you begin to be what?
Intelligent.
Intelligent.
You have to begin.
Okay.
Still not the-
Intelligent. Here you are not intelligent. So you have not the
Yeah.
form, okay? In the point the form is totally absent. You have the form of intelligence only in potency, okay? But Aristotle thinks that if you study, etc., at the point B, you are a woman very intelligent. But how this happened? Because he thinks that there is an orientation from the point A to the point B. Because if you have not an orientation, the motion can be in not the direction. Okay.
I think I see what you're, I think that maybe we have a disagreement about like what it means for there to be definitions of individual substances or something. Maybe we disagree on this, but I think I see the point. I get it. I think I get that. Thank you.
This is very important.
Yeah. thank
Because
you.
you have in all point, in every point, you have the potency and the mentality. You
Yeah,
have the
right.
presence and the absence
The
of the
privation
form.
and the form.
Of the form. But you have the form
Yeah.
perfectly formed in the point.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in
Thank
this
you.
sense, Aristotle is strongly anti-Heraclitean, because there's not truly anything that is becoming. There are something that is becoming and doesn't form, and something that has form, and for the form, and it's not to be in the com.
Anti-Heraclitean for
So
of reasons.
Okay, but is that's the point.
In the
So
motion.
You mean there's constant coming
you
into
need
being?
Heraclitus don't have a theory of motion.
anything that can become.
So
He has the
it is
constancy
the
of
second generation of the Heracliteans, because the philosophy of Heraclitus says almost that there is harmony of all things. All things are one. So the Heraclitus philosophy is the philosophy of one model of harmony.
No, Marco.
The second generation of the Heraclitean speaks of the continuous.
Who's that? Cratylus? But the second generation, who are they?
The second generation.
Is that Cratylus? Is that what Plato
I'm
is
thinking
citing?
to the first master of Plato, Cratylus.
Cratylus.
Cratylus. So the philosophy of the Heraclitus in the tradition become the philosophy of the becoming for Cratylus. But Heraclitus said another thing.
But Aristotle also does have a thing that undergoes no change and is pure actuality. And it's the cause, it's the unmoved mover. What is there? It's just even weirder.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's it. So we needed to have, in order to have make the notion of a form, and that's the way we needed to deny motion.
We need to
Deny motion. So there is no motion in a form.
You have also the form for entities that have not motion, for example, the prime model. The prime model is a
But
form.
still, we need to be Euclidean in this second generation sense. At least one thing that is the first motion. First motion, there's no form, no? Because there is no act, it's continuous motion. There is
From
no
the fire to the
in which
things,
it
from the
acquire
things to the
any
fire.
position. It's something that is to be in continuous economy in order to make possible other things.
This is
That's the upward mover, man. That's
Sorry?
the pure actuality.
Where did that?
That's the thing in Aristotle's system that gets everything going.
Yes, that's it, okay. So, I did not say that there is no first mover. I mean that the first mover is there because we need the first motion. And the first motion is a motion that is a continuous motion. And so the real
It's not a
necessity
circular.
of Aristotle's philosophy is not of the first mover. What is necessary is the first motion. So we
Yeah.
need the first mover in order to turn the
Well,
first motion.
there is a funny thing in the set of forms that are non-substantial from these other categories of things. He has one category that he calls the category of doing,
Of doing,
which implies
Yes.
is poiein,
Yeah.
right?
For the
Poiein.
theory of
There's also an
motion,
undergoing. What's the undergoing? Husking. There's poiein and husking. Doing and
yeah.
undergoing. So, but there's a kind of motion in that.
acting and the being the actor.
Yeah, right.
no,
Actually, being
I'm
active.
doing it when you make Control Z and Control Zeta with Macintosh. Undo is the Control Z.
Okay, okay.
What?
Macintosh, Control Z, and
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Doing
yeah,
it, undoing.
undo.
I have a question. It seems that some arguments go like this. You have potentiality of something, then you can establish this infinite process. And at the end of this process, something happens. And that's it. There's a contradiction of some kind. Right? There is an infinite process. And after this process is finished, there's a contradiction. For example, if we could divide the continuous, then we could keep dividing, and at the end we would have something that is not something measurable. Okay, then this makes me think about the shape of this argument is there is an infinite process, and after this process we can say something. But I think that this could be problematic because it is not true that after every infinite process, it is determined what happens afterwards. And this made me think, for example, about the Thomson's lamp, right? You think about a sequence of instants that lead to 12 o'clock. And then you turn on and off at every next instant. So, for example, when it is 1 minute to 12, you turn the lamp on. When it is half a minute to 12, you turn it off. And when it is 1/3 to 12, you turn it on again. And then you keep turning on and off through this sequence of instants that lead to 12. After this infinite process, there's no, this process doesn't say what happens to the lamp at 12.
Is the grand decision. Just one.
Yeah, so
Yes.
You are not a limit, but you are the limit classic.
yes, so you have the potential to turn on and off. You can establish this process, but this process doesn't say anything about what happens after this. Yeah, very early for 12, right? And the same happens with other things. For example, if you have infinitely many balls, each one of them with one number, and then when it is 1 minute to 12, you put balls 1 to 10 to some box, and you take ball number 1. If when it is half a minute to 12, you put numbers 11 to 20 and take out number 2. When it is 1/3 to 12, you put 21 to 30 and you take number 3. And you keep going. And then at the end, what happens at the end? Well, what happens at the end is that you don't have any balls in the box because you have taken each one of them at a certain point. But if you, instead of doing that, you take balls number 1, number 3, number 5, then at the end you have infinitely many balls. But from someone from outside, what you see is that you put 10 balls and remove 1. So the action is exactly the same. So this also demonstrates that what happens after an infinite process might not be determined. So these arguments that are based on, if you establish this process, afterwards you're going to have this thing, and this is contradictory, those arguments are not well formed.
But that depends, because you can have infinite process that well, but you can have infinite process that converge. So you know what if I start from one, and then I take the middle, and then I take the middle of the middle, and then I take the middle of the middle of the middle, etc. I know that this converges to 0, so in the end of the process, I have a 0. Or if you don't like the 0, you make that.
But
So the process that converge, the process that.
but that's the thing. Maybe you don't get 0. Maybe you get an infinitesimal.
No.
Yeah. Why not?
Because you have defined convergence as the process converges to 0. So what they will mean if I either in the end of the process, is to arrive at the end of the process, is to find the limit. So there are processes that still that converge, you will converge. When the process converges, you can say what happened after the infinite process. But what still didn't converge, we do not know what happened after the infinite process.
But then what I would say is that it is not clear to determine what happens. I think this
There is no
has
convergence.
so this
But would you, where is this argument, the wrong argument appear for the Jew in there?
there was, for example, that you could not have atoms because it really continues.
And then yeah, so the Eleatics, right? Yeah.
But I think that you make here a nice point that Giovanna only mentioned very, very quickly. But I think that it would be interesting to go more. For before Aristotle, this is something that I learned from Keck. So if I'm wrong, Giovanna stop me because I'm trying to repeat what we are teaching.
And also Brandon.
Before Aristotle, there is no idea of something that potentiality without an act. So to say that I can be divided means that in the end of the story, I will be divided. Okay? So the distinction between act and power in Aristotle's sense was not there for Aristotle. What does it mean to be infinitely divisible? It means that in the end, you will be divided. So, and in this case, the problem appears. But Aristotle is there to say, no, that's not the question. Potentiality is not necessarily so there is something distinct between being in the act and being in power. But now the point is problematic because when you speak about infinite, so what is the quality of the infinite? What does it mean that I can go to the infinite by a certain process?
What I think is that it's not determined. And to say that it is determined means that it is asking for the question.
The infinite is a particular object in the Aristotelian philosophy, because in this model, in reality, Aristotle has two notions of act. And these two notions are texts that Aristotle himself invented. These two terms are energia and the first thing. What is the difference between these two notions of act? The notion of energia is an act that has no relation with the potency. What I mean, when you have a change from the point A to the point B, in the point B in which you have the form, you have the act as energia. The potency here, there is not, okay? The entelequia, in the contrary, is a particular notion of actuality that is in relationship with the potency. And this is very important because this plays an important role in the psychology of Aristotle, for example, and in the biology of Aristotle. For example, what is an example of entelechy? I see, okay? My eyes see. So the function of my eyes are in act. But I see and I can see, okay? So the potency is present in the entelechy. This notion of act is important not only for the word of the biology, but also to explain the notion. Because if you in the point A has only the potency, and in the point B you have only the act as energia, what you have as motion? The motion is the relationship between entelechy and the potency. So you in every point have the potency and the entelechy. Indeed, the definition of motion is the entelechy of what is in potency as such. Okay, but you have an inherent in any point of the potency and the entelechy, often called white and black, okay? That in the infinite, we always speak of the Aristotle's infinite as an infinite in power. This is not possible, because for Aristotle, nothing is in power if it is not also in act. But for the infinite, how this is possible? How this is possible? Because the potency of the infinite is the same thing of its entelechy. Okay? It is the entelechy of the potency. There is a superposition, specificity.
Yes,
so can be is the same to be. Be can be.
For Aristotle, there is no infinite in act. Okay? But if there is no infinite in act, currently cannot be infinite.
Only power. No.
Because there is no power without the possibility of an act. So you cannot say there is not infinite in act, but there is infinite in power. Because it would be the same as, sorry, I could not say there's not, it cannot be an infinite in act, but it can be an infinite in power. Because this it would be the same to say that cannot be an elephant, but there is an elephant. Okay, but if the elephant cannot be an elephant, you cannot be an elephant. So you need to say something that allows to tell you in the same sense that you have infinite in power without having infinite in act. Not having
So you have infinite in power, but you have not the possibility of the infinite. Okay, and the notion of intelligence is exactly the notion that allows to have an infinite power, even if you have not an infinite.
There's no energy.
Even if you cannot have an infinite. Because when you say that you have not an infinite enough, you say that there is no energia of the infinite. But when you say that there is infinite in power, you say that the entirety of the infinite.
The entirety of the infinite is the same thing of the power of the infinite. And the infinite is the reality of the infinite.
It is what the infinity is being infinite.
That is the point, because when I say normally that something, say the bronze is a power status, I do not deny that they can have a status. Can have a status. And the bronze will become a status, tomorrow will be a status. So I say now it's still not a status, but tomorrow will be a status. So it can be a status. And to be in power means to be able to become. But the infinite is not be able to become infinite, because there is no infinite in power. Sorry. Enough. So we need something that allows me to say at the same time that the infinite is possible and is not possible. Correct?
Okay.
You cannot imagine this before understanding that.
I can imagine. I want to reverse it.
Inactuality.
Okay, so other questions? So thank you very much. So if you want to go to a dinner before the beer and then the dinner as usual. Okay. And as usual for the student, I know. Chapman student and not the Chapman student from the student.
Can I be a student today?
Raina, are you a student?
I could, where are you gonna go?
You want
Should I not be picky and screwed?
You want to go out?
Yeah.
Questo è interessante, non avevo mai capito. Questo è il contatto non susseguente, perché qui abbiamo una riga e un cerchio. Quando il cerchio arriva con la riga hai il contatto, che è il punto uno solo, ma non hai il successivo.
E dovrebbero essere due linee di natura diversa.
Sono di una linea natura diversa.
Sono
Quando hai una linea con una linea, hai il contatto e il successivo, cioè il continuo. Qui naturalmente hai il continuo, qui hai il susseguente.
Però qua se non c'hai il contatto, se non c'hai il punto, è un continuo.
No, il continuo è qui.
E lui dice che anche se la prendi così...
No, non fammi disegnarmi qui che voglio tenerlo questo.
What's this? Are you an espresso person?
No, no, questo
Sì,
non è un
lo
continuo.
dice.
No, questo forse.
Lo dice.
Questo no.
Lo dice.
No, qui no.
Dice che è meno continuo di questo. Meno.
È un continuo nel senso che possiamo prenderlo come uno. Vabbè, ma certo, anche il paio di scarpe possiamo prenderlo come uno.
Okay.
Questo va bene, no.
Il famoso paio
Possiamo
di scarpe.
prenderlo come, certo, tutto possiamo
Per
prenderlo.
esempio,
Anche questo possiamo prenderlo
la via
come uno.
piatta è un
Anche
continuo.
questo possiamo prenderlo come uno. Anche questo possiamo prenderlo come
Sai che
uno.
cosa per lui è importante anche? Il tipo di movimento che tu ci fai sopra.
La cosa interessante
Infatti dice
però...
che la mia gamba è continua, ma meno continua della sola coscia.
Sì,
perché le parti si possono
esatto.
muovere.
Però la cosa interessante è che quando andremo al libro 8, e questo sarà un problema, al libro 8 ci dirà che questo è il continuo, e questo no. E neanche questo. Perché l'argomento per dire che il moto circolare, il primo moto è circolare, è che il circolo è l'unico continuo.
Il più continuo di tutti.
È l'unico continuo, è il più continuo, il continuo, cioè è il continuo in sé, non è il continuo perché lo prendo come tale.
Esatto.
We need to stop. Ciao Luigi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Arrivederci, buona serata, grazie a voi.
Arrivederci.
They always say